To New Mexico, Arkansas to Oregon, Civic Network Television is lighting up America. CNT, linking America's communities to each other and the future. Live from Washington, D.C., Civic Network Television brings you Mobilizing Community Assets. And now, our moderator, Ramona Edelin.
Jody and John will now take us through Module 2, which you will find on page 16 in your course guide, Gifts of Individuals. Let's go back, I think, probably, John and Jody, to the assets map. At the center is the gifts of individuals. Help us think about that. What is it that you have discovered in your travels around the country?
Well, as you can see in the middle of the map, the gifts of individuals are central. And I think the best way for us to begin to work on this in our communities is to think about ourselves and our friends and our neighbors. And to think about the fact that everyone has a gift. Everyone. This has to be the central development principle. Everyone has a gift. Now, think about yourself. I know in my life, when I was a little kid, my Irish-American grandmother was making cherry pies one day, and I came in and I was standing there probably because I wanted to eat the dough, and I chattered away and chattered and chattered and chattered. And finally she stopped and she said, "John, you have a gift." And I said, "What is it?" Thinking she was going to give me something. She said, "No, you've got it already." She said, "You have the gift of blarney." Now, I don't know if you know what blarney means in the Irish, but it means, some people think, a golden tongue. Other people have other words that I don't want to repeat here for what that may also mean. But whether I had the gift or not, the fact that somebody thought I had the gift and nurtured it probably is the reason at 63 years of age I'm standing up here talking, right? So we all have a gift. Joe, you've got a gift, I know.
Well, my equivalent story as a youth, John, I think, was when I was caught in the bathroom with a whole pile of crayons drawing words on the wall of the bathroom, right? And my mother came in and caught me doing that, and she said, "You know, you really are a gifted writer, but you're doing it in the wrong place."
Yes.
But by telling me that I had a gift, she was able to sort of wean me from my habit of writing in the walls early. So I think that she too was sort of discovering, and I've been a writer ever since, and have liked doing that. Right? I also know about us, though, John, because we work together all the time, that we are people with a lot of emptiness and a lot of problems.
Right. Problems and needs. When I think about myself, a couple years ago, I had a major heart surgery, a great big scar down the middle of my chest. The thing about my scar is that it's of no use to my community. Right? The thing that may be of some use is an ability to articulate something.
Yeah, right.
Joe, what about you?
Well, I've had 5 knee surgeries, right? So whatever usefulness I have to my community has nothing to do with my mobility.
Yeah.
It does have to do, probably more, with my capacity to write. I mean, so we are both, right? Just like everybody in this room, people that have a certain amount of fullness and a good amount of emptiness. Right. Everybody in this room.
And that, we think, is the way to really start rediscovering the community building powers of localities, is to focus on the gifts of individuals. Each of us have a gift, and I know that that's true of the people in this room,
Yes.
Joe.
Yeah, because we asked earlier, just to make sure that we weren't in an absolutely strange group of people with no gifts at all. Right? We were pretty clear that this was a gifted group, and we asked people to list. So let me just ask now, if you were to ask each other, right, let's introduce each other by, what is a major gift? Let's do a little quick collection, one by one. What's the gift that you would like to sort of lift up most about yourself?
The gift and the ability of working with youth.
Working with youth.
Yes, the gift and the ability to consult and to counsel.
And to counsel with folks.
Financial skills.
Yes, money skills. Great.
Well, most of my experience has been with the group, primarily teachers.
Working with teachers.
Right.
Working with teachers.
I share your gift, Jody, of writing.
Also a
Or
writer.
I like to write anyway.
Terrific. There's plenty of writing to be done. Sure.
Basketball abilities.
You shoot hoops. Terrific. Terrific. Great.
The gift of compassion.
Compassion. Yes.
And along the financial lines, fundraising.
Yes. Yes.
I have to say my organizational skills.
And an organizational wizard, right? Wonderful. Wonderful. We took the liberty of writing these up on the board earlier, at least a few of them. Right? Here they are. Here's a list of the gifts of the people just at these tables in our room together here. These are folks who bring different kinds of gifts to the table. And one of the things we might want to think about is, are there any of these gifts, writing and financial skills and working with teens, are there any of these gifts that wouldn't be useful in community building? Any that you'd like to throw out? I doubt it. No. Every one of these things we could be using. Every one of them would be useful in community building, right? I think that's the lesson. The lesson is that there is a huge abundance of giftedness. We, in fact, now seldom start a discussion, particularly with young people or others who sometimes felt like they're at the margins of community. We seldom start a discussion without asking folks to identify their gifts, introduce each other by what you bring to the table. And sometimes we say, just to sort of help people along in a simple way, tell us about gifts of the hand and gifts of the heart and gifts of the head, right? We all know things, gifts of the head. We all can do things, the skills we have with our hands. And there's something about the core of us, what we believe in, what we're passionate about, our hearts, that we bring to the table too. And when people start thinking of gifts in those simple ways, it's amazing the community building material that appears. And you've just demonstrated that to all of us. You also did a little exercise of just collecting gifts at one table, right? And over here, we had sheet after sheet filled with gifts. Why don't you just do a quick read of what this one little table found when they started collecting gifts?
Our gifts of the head that we came up with were financial skills, teaching and critical thinking, common sense, counseling, consulting, management skills. Our gifts of the hand were working with flowers, playing the piano, painting and drawing, knitting, sewing, crafts, cooking, massage therapy. And our gifts of the heart were loving, caring, showing commitment, working with the disadvantaged, patience, and compassion.
That's a list that I would love to work with. We can all, I think, return to community and start building. Thanks. There's always there in community more than we think there is. That's a lesson that we constantly learn, right? But there are some people in community who, for various reasons, get known for their emptiness and for their deficiencies. And it's harder for folks to see their gifts. And so we've been particularly interested in thinking with community leaders about how do you find the gifts of those folks, right? The gifts of people sort of on the edge of community. And John, do you want to tell us about that for a minute?
Right. You know, a weak community, we have finally understood, is a place where there are lots of people who don't give their gifts. And so we have wondered more and more, why is it that there are communities where lots of people who have gifts aren't giving them? And we think that leads us back to the needs map. You see, the needs map is a map that tells us how 5 institutions are saying about people, what's important about you is your scar, right? And so that takes the person that gets labeled and pushes them to the edge of the community. And I think what we finally came to understand is that's how weak communities look. If we can think of a community as being a group of people together, right? What happens when we have lots and lots of people who are called needy is that people who might be together in the community, right, get forced out to the edge. And what forces them out to the edge is names like welfare recipient, names like pregnant teenage girl, like illiterate person. And we know there are all kinds of institutions that need those names, but their effect in community is to say, this person is needy and ungifted. And then what happens is that we surround those people with professionals, right? So that we create a funny kind of world for them in which they are really excluded from community life because they are surrounded by agencies and programs. Incidentally, what a prison is the most serviced community in the world, right? It's a physical wall and a wall of control and programs, right? So that we create strangers, right? And the word what we think is best for defining these people is that they are strangers. We don't know them. We don't understand their gifts. And every community initiative that we saw was based upon two principles. Number one, everybody, absolutely everybody, no exception in the community has a gift. And number two, the community was a place where either by its culture or its organization was about saying to everybody, we don't want you out here. We can see you have a gift. Come on in. We need you. We're not a place where we need strangers. We need your gifts. Joe?
Well, there are lots of different kinds of people who end up out at the edge of community, and we all have them in our community. Every community has strangers, right? We asked our friends in the studio here before we went on the air to make a quick list, thinking about their own communities, and we're going to ask everybody to be doing this after the program tonight. If you thought about your own community, who are the strangers? And we got a long list. Here are just a few of the candidates for the strangers in the communities represented here in our panel. Homeless people, people with disabilities, people with AIDS, poor people or welfare recipients generally, and the elderly. Right? All people who, in part of their life, get defined as empty and deficient by helping institutions and professionals often, and therefore find themselves out here at the edge. So one of the ways of thinking about building community, if you really do believe that everybody's gifted and community building is about giving the gifts, right, is to start that exercise. Who are the strangers in our community, and how can we plug them back in? And we want to just now tell you very briefly a story or two about communities that are doing that.
Right. On the west side of Chicago, there's a neighborhood organization. It's an organization of citizens, of associations, right? And that organization decided that one of the things that had made that neighborhood weaker than they wanted it to be was that there were a lot of people in their neighborhood who were strangers. And so they brought on board a local resident as an organizer, but this organizer's job was to reach out to the strangers, get to know them and their gifts, and then introduce them into the center of the community, right? To find the gifts of the strangers in their midst and bring them into the community. And the name of this neighborhood organization is the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. And I'd like to introduce you to the organizer whose task is to begin to initiate the building of community by bringing people who've been labeled into the community's life, Rosita De La Rosa.
As an organizer for LSNA, my work with the Community Building Project has been reaching out to people with developmental disability and bringing them back into community life. And in doing that, we look to connect them in different groups and organizations and clubs. Genevieve came from an association called Victor C. Newman. And basically, there is a shelter workshop atmosphere where she goes to 5 days a week and then goes back to a group home setting. And being more part of community